Hello and welcome to Learn with Ryan. Today we are going to have a look at how to form the present tense in French. Now before we go straight into it, there are a few words that you should know, as I will mention them whenever we learn about different tenses in French. Now the first word you should know is conjugate. Now if we conjugate a word, it simply means we are writing it in a particular tense. So for example, if we were to conjugate the verb to play in the present tense using he in English, we would have he plays. To conjugate to go in the simple past using I, we would get I went. Another word you should know is infinitive. This refers to a verb that has not been conjugated. It is essentially the form of the verb that you would find in a dictionary. For example, to play, to go, and to have are all infinitives in English. In this lesson, we will look at what infinitives look like in French. So now that we have those words in our vocabulary bank, let's get started. Before we look at conjugating verbs in the present tense in French, let's have a look at the subject personal pronouns. And here they are. Je, meaning I. Tu, meaning you. Il, elle, he, she. Nous, we. Vous, you. Il, elle, they. You probably already noticed that there are two words for you. We've got tu and we've got vous. So I will make a separate video on the difference between tu and vous, but for now you should know that tu is the informal version of you and vous is the formal version of you. So let's have a look at how to conjugate verbs in the present tense in French. Now before we look at conjugating verbs in the present tense in French, let's have a look at some verbs in French and see what the infinitive looks like. Remember, the infinitive of a verb is a verb that has not been conjugated. It's the form of the verb you find in a dictionary. So for example, the verb to go is aller. The verb to watch is regarder. And the verb to play is jouer. Now you'll notice that all of these verbs, all of these infinitives end in the letters ER. Let's have a look at some other verbs. We've also got the verb finir, which means to finish. We've also got the verb choisir, which means to choose. We've also got the word rougir, which means to blush. Now notice that these verbs end in the letters IR. Let's have a look at some other infinitives. We've got descendre, which means to go down. We've got vendre, which means to sell. And we've got the word fondre, which means to melt. These verbs end in RE. And in fact, we can classify these verbs under ER verbs, IR verbs and RE verbs. Yes, that's right. All infinitives in French end in either the letters ER, IR or RE. Now when we look at the present tense in French, the endings that we use depend on whether we are dealing with ER, IR or RE verbs. In this lesson, we are going to have a look at regular present tense verbs. And what I mean by regular is that they follow the general rule for the present tense in French. There are also irregular verbs that don't follow the general rule in French, which we will have a look at in the next lesson. So to form the present tense in French for ER verbs, we simply drop the ER and we add the following endings. For je, we add the letter E. For tu, we add the letters ES. For il, elle, we add the letter E. For nous, we add the letters ONS. For vous, we add the letters EZ, and for il, elle, we add the letters ENT. So let's take our friend the verb to play, and let's conjugate that verb in the present tense. So the verb to play is jouer. So in the present tense, this is what we'll get. Je joue, tu joues, il, elle joue, nous jouons, vous jouez, il, elle joue. Now you might be thinking, hang on there, we've added an S at the end of tu, but you didn't pronounce the S. Also, we added the letters ENT at the end of il, elle, but we didn't pronounce the ENT. And that's because in French there are lots of silent letters, especially letters at the end of words. And it's the case here. For tu, when we add that ES ending, we don't pronounce the S. So in actual fact, the je, tu, il, elle form are pronounced exactly the same. And it's the same with il, elle, the plural version. ENT is not pronounced. It's still pronounced joue. So do be very careful about that. We don't pronounce those final letters. So here's one for you. Can you conjugate the verb travailler in the present tense? Travailler is the verb to work. So see if you can conjugate that verb in the present tense. So how did you do? Hopefully not too bad. Let's have a look. We've got je travaille, tu travailles with an S at the end, il, elle travaille, nous travaillons, ONS, vous travaillez, EZ, il, elle travaille, ENT at the end, but don't pronounce the ENT. So let's have a look at IR verb endings. So with IR verbs, we drop the IR and we add the following endings. For je, we add the letters IS. For tu, we add the letters IS again. For il, elle, we add the letters IT. For nous, we add the letters ISSONS. For vous, we add the letters ISSEZ. And for il, elle, we add the letters ISSENT. That was a mouthful, wasn't it? Let's have a look at an example. For example, we've got the verb finir, which means to finish. Clearly, it's an IR verb because it ends in the letters IR. So, the verb finir in the present tense. All together now. Je finis, tu finis, il, elle finit, nous finissons, vous finissez, il, elle finissent. Now remember, again, we don't pronounce the final letters there. So the ENT for that final il, elle, we don't pronounce. Okay, over to you. What about the verb choisir, which means to choose? So for choisir, we've got je choisis, tu choisis, il, elle choisit, nous choisissons, vous choisissez, ils, elles choisissent. Finally, let's have a look at RE verbs. So for RE verbs, we drop the RE and we add the following endings. For je, we add the letter S. For tu, we add the letter S. For il, elle, we don't add anything. For nous, we add the letters ONS. For vous, we add the letters EZ. And for il, elle, we add the letters ENT. So let's take an example, the verb vendre, which means to sell. Je vends, tu vends, il, elle vend, nous vendons, vous vendez, ils, elles vendent. Again, final letters are not pronounced. What about the verb descendre, which means to go down? Over to you. And how did you do? Let's have a look. We have je descends, tu descends, il, elle descend, nous descendons, vous descendez, ils, elles descendent. Now for that il, elle, we need to pronounce that D because of that ENT that follows, but we don't pronounce the ENT. To finish off with today, I want to introduce to you two very important irregular verbs. And they are the verbs avoir and être. Now avoir means to have and être means to be. These are the two most important verbs in the French language because you will need them in order to form other tenses in the French language, which we'll have a look at in other videos. So before I leave, let's have a look at how to conjugate the verbs avoir and être in the present tense. So let's start off with the verb to have, avoir. J'ai, tu as, il, elle a, nous avons, vous avez, ils, elles ont. Now notice that with il, elle, we've added a little Z sound, didn't we? Ils ont. And that's because on starts with a vowel. It starts with the letter O. And it's very difficult to pronounce il, elle, on. We've got a vowel clash there. So the French don't like vowel clashes. So what we need to do is we need to link it. It's what we call a liaison. We link it together so it flows nicely. Ils, elles ont. And also we have the same here with vous. Vous avez. And nous avons. We have the same idea, linking the S sound with that vowel to form a Z sound. So that's to have. Let's have a look at être, to be. Je suis, tu es, il, elle est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils, elles sont. So do try and learn these present tense forms of the verbs avoir and être because they are very important and they come up all the time in the French language. And that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed today's lesson on the present tense in French. Before I go, here's a little exercise for you. Can you conjugate the verbs below in the present tense in French? So I want you to conjugate those verbs you see on the screen in the present tense in French. And in the next video, I will tell you what those verbs are in the present tense. So I shall see you in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe as always, and I will see you very, very soon for some more learning with Ryan.